And in this video, we are going to start reviewing fiber. As we had maybe introduced in our previous video, fiber is under the category of complex carbohydrates, but the difference between other types of complex carbohydrates is fiber does not convert into sugar or calorie. It is more focused on offering other functions in the body. Fiber is probably one of my most favorite categories in terms of food, and it's one of these food categories that we need to consume a lot more of in general. Fiber is exclusively found in plants. It only comes from plant, and so you must consume plant-based foods in order to get fiber. There are two main varieties we are going to cover today, and that's going to be the soluble fiber and the insoluble fiber. I left it at these two categories to try to make the introduction simple, and from there you can let your research take you wherever you'd like. So I'm going to use this example or this drawing of the digestive tract, which you may have seen before, and walk you through the value of both soluble and insoluble fiber. I want you to think of soluble fiber, soluble meaning dissolvable, as a glue in a food, and insoluble fiber meaning not dissolvable as a wrap of food. So let's go ahead and start with things that are higher in soluble fiber. So when you first digest, let's just take an apple. When you first digest an apple, it goes to the stomach, gets broken down by the acid, and then it heads over to this area right here. And here, one of the first things that it's going to be encountered by is the liver. Now, the liver has a couple of extremely important jobs. One is to make sure that there are no major toxins that the body needs to be worried about. But another very important job is to send this signal of fullness or satiety to the brain that helps you consume less as long as there's nutrients associated with it. The body is very well versed with fiber because that's natural, right? And it knows plants very well. It's one with nature. And so what it knows is that when it senses fiber, especially soluble fiber, likely there's a lot of nutrients following it. And this means the body needs time for digestion. So one of the most important pieces of soluble fiber is helping you get that signal sent to the brain to feel full, and feel full faster or earlier in the meal. This is another big reason why, especially when you eat things that are higher in soluble fibers, very rarely do we need to tell you to stop yourself before having too much. I usually don't have to tell you to stop eating 5 apples. Most people stop eating apples much earlier because of that soluble fiber. Now, when it gets past that, we start looking at things like the gallbladder, which is helpful to digest any fats that comes from that food, the pancreas, which is our next big stop. Because remember, fiber is a type of carbohydrate. So the soluble fiber piece of carbohydrate, nothing really happens here. But the other part of the carbohydrate, so the complex carbohydrate, for example, that may come from your foods in this category, those have to be digested by the pancreas. The pancreas is going to offer a hormone called insulin, and you want to imagine insulin as a key or a carrier to allow that blood sugar, to allow that energy molecule to go to things like the muscles and the brain. And worst case scenario, if there's too much extra, to go to things like your fatty tissue. Now, again, tying back to the main point here, because the liver is able to send a signal of fullness earlier, the body is able to very slowly break down those carbohydrates so that you don't get things like rapid blood sugar increases. So again, the very big benefit of eating more soluble fiber foods in moderation of the carbohydrate piece, of course, is that it gives something like the pancreas and the gallbladder some time in order for the body to be able to digest it. Now, once this fiber food goes down to the large intestine, the fiber really becomes the food for that microbiome that we had talked about, your beautiful community of bacteria, fungi, viruses, and other microbes. Those microbes need to eat something too. They're your soldiers and you want to take care of them. So by offering them fiber, the nutrients that this fiber is glued to are going to come into your body, and that microbiome can go ahead and digest these fibers for themselves. So it's really a beautiful process and a super important piece of our nutrition. Now, when we talk about insoluble fiber, this is the fiber that our body doesn't really digest. It still has some extremely important jobs, and I like to use this term or example called a wrap. So step number 1, let's take something like a cauliflower or potato or even kale. When those things enter your body and they get to your stomach, I want you to imagine that the stomach acid's job is to help you break down your foods into its macro and micronutrients. But micronutrients and proteins, for example, are extremely fragile. And if they're exposed to too much acid without protection, they could get damaged. And we had already talked about the importance of introducing your body to as little processed and little damaged foods as possible. This is one of the big values of insoluble fiber. It's going to act like a wrap for all of the food particles that come into your body, and let that stomach acid act more on things like this fiber, maybe the carbohydrates and fats, but allow you to release things like micronutrients and proteins without significant damage. Insoluble fibers play an invaluable role in things like acid reflux, for example, for that reason. They really reduce the amount of acid produced in the body, and they're highly anti-inflammatory when eaten in their most holistic natural form. Then, as we go through the digestive tract, because again, it's not going to be digested by the body, these also play a huge role in the large intestine. Because they act as a nice wrap for your waste product, you have to worry very little about creating things like micro tears in your colon, which other terms for that you may have heard are diverticulosis, for example, or outpouching. They really help to reduce any type of damage to your colon while your waste product is waiting to be excreted. And even in the excretion process, because there's a quote-unquote wrap around these waste products, you're able to pass them without having to strain too much. And that straining is really what causes things like hemorrhoids. So in so many ways, fiber plays a great role in the functionality of your digestion. And the more fibers that you can consume, of course, moderating in terms of the time that you consume it, and being careful on the amount of caloric density of that food, you are going to get a maximum amount of benefit from the fiber that you consume. So I hope this was informational and helpful, and we will move forward to another macronutrient in the next video.